Dragonfruit by Makiia Lucier. Chapter 30. Hey, there's something in the water. The words, whispered and anxious, came from Moa. Not 5 minutes had passed since they had left the starlit sky behind them. Hanley turned toward the sound of his voice, but there was nothing to be seen. Few places were darker than a cave without a torch. What is it? Sam kept his voice low. He stood somewhere to Hanley's left. How should I know? Moa asked. I feel it too, Bayani said. There came the sound of an oar skimming the surface, followed by a soft thud. A log? Hanley asked. Plenty of logs, Hanley commented 10 thuds later. Liko, Sam said with some urgency. We need light. Not a lot. Oh. Liko cleared her throat. Some light, please, little ones. 10 fireflies appeared, directly over Liko's head, before swooping between the two boats. Moa choked back a gasp. The light was meager, but it was enough to make out the bodies floating in the water. Dozens of them. Islanders and those from overseas kingdoms. What was left of Bragadin's crew. I don't see any injuries. Sam knelt at the side of the canoe, inspecting the bodies as they drifted past. At this speed, it would not be long before they reached the cave opening and dispersed into open sea. How did they die? Katamara was also kneeling. He reached over and grabbed a dragoner by his tunic. Hanley saw his red beard. She pictured him standing on the deck of the Anemone, alive and well. What color is the color of a heart flower? Pink, you idiot. Katamara brought the dragoner's face close to his own and sniffed. This one smells like rum. He let go and reached for another. This one, too. Hanley and Sam exchanged a glance. Poison in the rum? Sam asked. It's been done before, Katamara said. A coward's weapon. He looked over at Moa. You're lucky, young pirate. If you live past tonight, you should rethink your life's choices. Moa leaned over the side of the canoe and vomited. Let's go, Sam said. Bayani took up the oar. Liko, after a glance at the retching, heaving Moa, took up the other. The fireflies winked out, plunging them back into darkness. Sorry. As they drew deeper into the cave, Hanley found they no longer needed the fireflies. Light appeared ahead. Torches? She asked. Ghost crabs, Sam explained. Just like in the menagerie. Look, there's our ledge. In no time at all, the canoes were tied to some rocks and left behind. The ledge that ran along the side of the cave was narrow. They hurried along in single file, quick-stepped and silent. Sam led the way, stopping only once. He pointed first at Moa, then at poor Katamara, who lagged behind, clutching at his side. Moa grimaced. He retraced his steps, kneeling long enough for the old man to climb onto his back. They continued on. The light grew brighter and brighter, and when the cavern came into view, Hanley saw the ghost crabs Sam had spoken of. Teeming masses covered the cave walls, each emitting a milky glow. The crabs made it possible to see the horribleness laid out before them. A massive cavern, a great pool of water, a dry, sandy ledge. On the ledge was the blue sea dragon, dying. A harpoon jutted inches from its heart, just as Moa had described. Most of the dragon's scales had fallen off, exposing patches of gray flesh that rose and fell quickly in a pant. The remaining dragon fruit were no longer in his pouch, but he had kept them close. His body curled around them. Both eggs appeared unharmed, the rose-colored shells intact. The sea dragon's eyes were half open and turned to the ship that was anchored in the water, invitingly close. Captain Bragadin's compass rose, formerly the Anemone. Its side hatch had been left open. Through it came a child's voice, wobbly, scared. Hello? Is anyone there? Sam raised a finger to his lips, then looked across the cavern where, slightly ahead of them, watching from behind a boulder, Captain Bragadin was. His back was to them, but there was no mistaking the way he stood, or the way he held his head. Hanley leaned in to hear Sam's quietly spoken instructions. The dragon could still be dangerous. I can't risk him going for the ship. I'll head there with the darts. Katamara, you come with me. You too, he said to Moa. Liko, Bayani, go back for the boats. We need to get the children out of here. Bayani hesitated, sending a venomous look in the captain's direction. Understanding, Sam said, The little ones first, Bayani. Bayani nodded. He hustled after Liko, who had not waited around. What about him? Moa asked, meaning the captain. Katamara looked at Hanley, whose skin suddenly itched. Her marking had begun to move again. Up one leg and down the other, winding slowly around her chest. When she held up an arm, she caught a glimpse of dragon scale. The ink rich and black, the detail fine. Hanley's voice shook slightly. I'll take care of Captain Bragadin. Now Sam and Moa were staring at her. How? Sam wanted to know. With what? Moa scoffed. Katamara smiled. Hanley's marking flashed across her face. She felt it, like wind whipping past. Moa's eyes bulged. He nearly fell over, and Katamara's hand shot up. A upward, covering his frightened yelp. Sam opened his mouth, shut it. He came closer, shocked, but at least he knew what a marking was. Honolly. He took her hands in his, gently, and together they watched scales coil around her arms, from wrist to elbow to shoulders. That is no firefly. Laughter bubbled inside her, threatening to spill over. Does it hurt? Sam asked. Honolly turned her arms over. No, it itches. Hello? A small voice called out again from the ship. Is anyone there? Come, Katamara ordered. Rescue now, love later. Sam leaned over and kissed Honolly. Her marking froze in perfect astonishment somewhere around her ankle. Be careful, Sam told her, and then he was gone, dragging a still gaping Moa away, his neck craned to look back at her. Katamara paused long enough to say, Trust your marking, lady. She will help you. She? Honolly allowed herself a moment to touch her fingers to her lips before she kicked off her sandals and removed Sam's cloak. She sat on the ledge, feet dangling over the side, then slipped beneath the water completely. Her marking was no longer just a marking. She felt it leave her skin. A sea dragon swam directly beneath her, scales as real as the dragons Honolly had spent a lifetime around. Its frill brushed against her face. She held on tight to it as they dove deeper. When Honolly resurfaced, dripping wet, it was onto the ledge behind Captain Brackenden, who had been busy. In the short time it had taken Honolly to swim across the cavern, he had rolled out a small catapult. It looked like the weapon once bolted to the very top of his ship. Before she could take a step, Brackenden released the lever. A single cannon shot forward, striking the hull. Wind splintered, and childish shrieks erupted. The ship listed sharply. Get up, you stupid lizard, Captain Brackenden muttered, his back to her. Move! I did all the work. All you have to do is eat. The ship listed even more, and the cries from within grew louder. Honolly looked behind her. There was no sign of Liko and Bayani. Across the way, Sam's head was barely visible above some rocks. And Honolly knew with a terrible certainty that the canoes wouldn't arrive in time, not before the hull sank beneath the surface. Sam knew it too. He ran from his hiding place and dove into the water. When Moa followed, there was a startled oath from Captain Brackenden. He stumbled to the water's edge, hurling vile curses across the way. The blue dragon lifted his head slightly, but that was all. He had no interest in a ship full of children, or in anything except protecting his eggs. Captain, Honolly said. The curses stopped. Very slowly, Captain Brackenden looked over his shoulder. When he faced her completely, Honolly fell back a step, for he painted a grisly picture. His head was wrapped in bandaging, over eye and lip and chin, where Honolly had cut him from the dragon scale. Blood seeped through the cloth. He looked at her, soaking wet, then looked behind her. You're a brave one. Not even a dagger to protect yourself? The queen's dagger was strapped to her arm. Honolly pulled it free. Do I need a dagger? You have some nerve, he marveled. Between the two of us, who has been more wronged? Come closer, Honolly. Come see what you did to my face. He wouldn't make her feel guilty for defending herself. You frightened me. Back on the ship. I wouldn't have hurt you otherwise. Touching. And yet my eye is still gone. Where is Vea? Also gone. Honolly lied, just to watch him flinch. She had learned a lesson or two from him about cruelty. How? He demanded. Honolly had a clear view of the water behind him. Sam had reached the ship, which had turned almost completely on its side. He slid along the hull, too fast, before catching himself at the hatch opening. He disappeared within. I said, how? Honolly pictured Vea lying prone from a spider bite. She would be fine in a matter of hours. Imprisoned, but fine. Which was more than could be said for Fetu. Thinking of him brought on a fresh wave of fury. Your navigator was bitten by the queen's own spider, then eaten. Slowly. Digested. Slowly. She's still being digested, I imagine. You're lying. I am not. Prince Samati was fond of his bat. You're not the only one who can be vindictive. Captain Braggon's face had lost all expression. I should have killed you years ago when you first showed your face. Your mistake. A familiar, hateful smile appeared. And yours is standing here all alone without your prince to save you. Hanai looked at him, really looked, and was no longer afraid. We're the ones you preferred, weren't we? The ones who had no one? The captain was standing by the miniature catapult. He wrenched it toward her and hit the lever. At the same time, Hanali felt herself knocked to the ground by something heavy and wet. She did not see the cannonball, but she felt the heat of it overhead, heard the harmless splash in the water. She rolled away as her sea dragon rose up behind her. She was a beautiful animal, with scales the palest pink, jaws wide open. Captain Braggon's mouth opened. His scream never came. The dragon swooped down and he was no more. and Hanali learned an important truth about her new marking. She did not like to swallow her food whole. She preferred to take her time and chew first. Chapter 30. Good girl. Shaken, Hanali reached up and patted her sea dragon on the nose, a nose as rough as a coconut husk. Her eyes were brown, with long sweeping lashes, and her frill was the softest white of a plumeria blossom. Two dimples appeared, to Hanali's delight, before she remembered where they were and why. Rescue now, love later. Come on, we have to help. Hanali climbed onto her dragon's back. She could hear the canoes approaching, the slap of oars against the water surface. Liko and Bayani no longer bothered with stealth. They would be here soon. Across the way, Katamara leaned against the blue sea dragon, stroking his skin where the scales had fallen off. The animal did not seem to care that Katamara was so close to his precious dragonfruit. His chin rested on the sand, and his eyes were indifferent slits. Of Sam and Moa she saw nothing. She guided her dragon around to the ship's hatch. Sam! She yelled. Then she jerked back when a small boy appeared in the opening, handed up by Sam, who said, Take him. Hanali took the crying boy and looked around for Liko and Bayani, whose canoes had stopped at the cavern opening. Their mouths hung open. Hanali beckoned them over, calling out, She won't hurt you, and found she had to repeat her words for the poor boy's sake. His cries were now accompanied by terrified hiccups. She passed him down to Liko. When Hanali peered down into the hull, she saw dozens of children in water up to their knees and shoulders, depending on how tall they were. The older ones carried the younger ones in their arms and around their necks. A little girl sat on Moa's shoulders and another on Sam's. He passed her to Hanali, saying, The chief said there were 30 altogether. Make sure we have 30. I'll make sure. Bayani crawled onto her dragon, on his hands and knees first. The ship listed again. After that, there was no time to think about anything but the children. Sam lifted a child to Hanali, who gave the child to Bayani, who leaned down from the sea dragon, swinging the child into Liko's arms. Hanali counted as they passed from her arms to the safety of the boat. 3, 5, 4, 5, 6, 18, 19, and so on. When both canoes were full, she settled them onto the back of her dragon, murmuring assurances the whole way. This is a nice sea dragon. My marking. She won't hurt you, I promise. A dripping wet Moa climbed out after the last little girl. Sam hung onto the opening with both hands. By then, the ship had tilted so far to one side that behind him was a long drop to the other side of the hull. Hanali grabbed his arms and pulled. Sam didn't budge. How many? He asked. Count them. Hanali looked over her shoulder. 10 in the first canoe, 11 in the second, 8 on the dragon. That wasn't right. 29. Wait, I'll count again. I have 29, Moa said grimly. 29, Liko called out. Lady, Bayani knelt beside her. There's only 29. Hanali tightened her hold on Sam's arms. His neck was craned. He searched behind him into the black. When he looked up at her, she knew what he was going to say before he said it. Let go, Hana. She could not argue. Hanali did as he wished with her heart in her throat. Sam slapped something into her hand. She's wet. She'll be mad, he warned, and then he fell, his eyes on her, into the dark until the darkness engulfed him. It was a long time before she heard a splash. Hanali swung one leg into the hatch. I'm going to help. Hey, Moa held fast her arm. We don't know your dragon. You need to stay here. And look, what's that old man doing? On the ledge, the blue sea dragon appeared as if in a trance. His tail slapped gently against the sand. Katamara, who had not moved now. His hand waved behind his back urgently. Go! Go at once, his hand told them. Hanali yanked her arm free of Moa. She said to the guards, Take the boats and come back. What about them? Moa said, meaning the children on her dragon. They were cold and wet. They were wet and cold and scared. When Nico and Bayani return, they'll go. Hanali, Moa said, whatever that old man is doing, it might not last. We have to go. Hanali felt herself crumpling in front of 29 frightened children. She hated how reasonable Moa sounded. I'm not leaving him. There was no sound coming from the hull and no way to see. In her hand was the pouch he had given her. He had given her VT. I'll stay, Moa elbowed her side. He straddled the side of the hatch opening, holding onto the edges so he did not fall in. I'll watch for your prince. You go. Moa, go! He had said the same thing to her back in the anemone when he had not stopped her escape. Moa had done bad things, but not always. She had to hold on to that. Hanali took her sea dragon and left. Trust your marking, Hanali had said. She will help you. Her sea dragon moved slowly and with care, so her young riders did not tumble. The light from the ghost crabs gradually faded. It's very dark, a little voice said. It is, isn't it? Hanali said. Liko, are you near? Here, lady. A light appeared to Hanali's left, a solitary firefly that multiplied. Before they knew it, hundreds of bright, twinkling fireflies came to life, a welcome distraction. Hanali took the pouch from her belt. She's wet. She'll be mad. Hanali had braced herself so that when VT sprang out, fangs bared, she did not scream. The little spider jumped onto her shoulder. Sorry, VT, she murmured. VT's response was a tiny prick on her neck. Not painful, just uncomfortable enough to make a point, before the spider settled down. Hanali looked over at Liko. Thank you, she mouthed. Smiling slightly, Liko struck her oar in the water, guiding them out of the cave and into the night. The stars were out, which made it easy to see the crowd at the shore. Hanali kept her sea dragon out of range of any spears or harpoons until Liko and Bayani were able to explain that she was no threat. A girl, about 10, had buried her face in the dragon's frill. She raised her head and said to Hanali, Is she really your marking? She is. Does she have a name? Not yet. She's very, very new. The dragon looked wistful. I've always wanted my own sea dragon. And Hanali, worried as she was for Sam, had to smile. Me too. Only when Liko waved did Hanali bring her dragon in with the last of the children. She handed them down to those who had waded into the shallows. Mothers and fathers, village elders, Rosamie and William. Later she would remember that Jamar had not been among them. She gave the last little girl over to Chief Umair. One is missing, she told him quietly. Prince Samati is still looking. I'm going back. The long night had taken its toll on the weary chief. My grandson Tane, he isn't here. We'll find him. She turned her dragon around. Chief Umair said, Go safely, child. The blue sea dragon had breathed his last. When Hanali entered the cavern, the first thing she saw was a frill, limp and black. Katamara had grabbed a fistful in both hands. His head was bowed. Another prayer, another dragon lost. Her sorrow was tempered by the sight of Sam, who leaned against a wall beside Moa, over by the tail. With them was a boy about 12, the chief's grandson. He was safe, but his safety had come at a price. Both dragonfruit had hatched. The only sign of the young sea dragons was a slimy trail that led from the broken eggshells to the water. Hanali guided her marking past Captain Bragadin's ship. Only a small portion of the hull remained above the surface. The dragon stopped at the water's edge. Her body lay parallel to the dead sea dragon. She turned her head to watch him, making no sound beyond a lone, distressed call. Hanali stroked her frill and murmured comforting words. She jumped down onto the ledge where Sam was waiting for her. You're not hurt? He buried his face in her hair. Sam smelled of salt and seaweed, just as she did. Katamara said, Bragadin fired a cannon at you. He missed. I'm not hurt. Are you? I'm fine. Sam stepped back. They inspected one another to make sure. Tane hit his head and fell into the water. Lucky for him, he fell face up. He looked at her marking and smiled. I've never seen such a beautiful dragon. At that, her marking's ears perked up, standing tall over her frill. Sam wasn't fine. She could see it on his face, behind the smiles and flattery. Fatu was lost. The eggs were gone. He was very close to cracking. I'm so sorry, Sam. Sam looked away. They'd already hatched when we climbed out of the hull. There was no sign of them. He stepped away from her. We have to get back. They'll be worried. He called Tane over. There was a lump on his forehead, and he was as tired and damp as everyone else. The boy eyed the pink sea dragon and said, With respect, lady, I think I'll wait for a canoe. It took some coaxing, but they managed to get him on the sea dragon. Moa joined them, subdued, but Katamara would not come. I will stay, the animal keeper said. Send someone tomorrow. It is tomorrow, Kata, Sam said. Katamara waved them off. Later. Nothing Sam said would change his mind. They left Katamara there, and the journey back to the shore was completed in near total silence. Hanali handed VT to Sam. He returned the pouch to his belt. A smaller crowd greeted them. Most had taken their children home to bed, but Tane's family had waited anxiously. His parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins. Their reunion lifted Hanali's spirits. Sam and Moa had gone off to speak, leaving Hanali in the shallows with her sea dragon. Hanali slid off her back and then went around and kissed her on the nose. Thank you, my dear. A long, wet tongue flopped out and licked her. The sea dragon vanished, reappearing as a marking on Hanali's hand. Hanali waited out in time to hear Sam tell Moa, Go, before I change my mind. Sam went to speak to the chief. Moa waited for Hanali. You didn't tell them that I was the one who sunk Prince Augustus' ship. Someone will tell them. The dragoners bitten by VT would eventually be able to speak again. They would be desperate to shift the blame. They'll come looking for you and your family. They won't find us, Moa said. Why are you helping me? A life for a life. He had not meant to, but Moa had saved her, sending her on a path back to Tamarind, bringing her home. She said, Remember me to your mothers and sisters. I wish them well. Moa was quiet. Finally he nodded, accepting his question would not be answered. He glanced over at Sam and lowered his voice. I didn't want to say anything back at the cave. Those eggs, Hanali, they didn't hatch on their own. What do you mean? The old man. He cracked them open while your prince was down in the hull. I saw. Her whole body went tight. Are you certain? Yeah. He took the dragons out of their shells and put them on the sand, pointing them to the water. If you're lying to me, Moa, why would I lie? Who is he, anyway? Hanali looked toward the sleeping lady. Something was very wrong here. Katamara works in the menagerie. He's been there for years. What did you do before the menagerie? Hanali tried to remember what Sam had told her. She shook her head. She didn't know. Huh, was all Moa said. Hanali had nearly forgotten. Moa, what did Captain Bragadin do with the other egg? What other egg? There were 3, she told him. We found eggshells near the lagoon at Tamarin City. The dragon was missing. What did you do with it? Never saw it, he said. Then, I'm not lying. We harpooned the green dragon in deep sea but didn't kill it. We could tell by the frill that it had laid its eggs, but we couldn't follow it back to its nest. There were too many carts near the city. Then who? Wasn't us. I'm gonna go, Moa added, eyeing Sam, who was looking over the chief's head, eyeing Moa in return. Before your prince changes his mind. I don't like that spider. Hanali didn't know what she said, didn't know why she said it. The words just came out. Do you need squid? Moa's eyebrow shot up. Gold? Hanali nodded. If you need it, thank you for watching over him. Moa took one step back and then another. Keep your squid. I can make my own way. Be careful, sister. He turned and walked off down the beach until the night swallowed him up.